Levi knew he should have looked away. The moment the silver car kicked up dust on the lane, he should have turned his back and focused on the cedar planks in his hands. That was the way of his people. "We are in the world," his dad always said, "but not of Italiano." But when the car door opened and the girl with the camera stepped out, capturing the golden light hitting the cornfields, Levi didn't turn away. For the first time in 20 years, the silence of the farm felt lonely, and the letter she would leave him weeks later would change the Troyer family forever. The scent of shaved cedar and linseed oil was the perfume of Levi Troyer's life. It was a good smell, a clean smell. It was the smell of hard work and honest living. At 20 years old, Levi had shoulders broadened by the hand plane and hands calloused by the chisel. He stood in the open doorway of the workshop, watching the dust motes dance in the shaft of afternoon sunlight. This was Holmes County, Ohio, where the hills rolled like waves of green patchwork quilts, stitched together by fences and dusty lanes. It was a Saturday, which meant the tourists were out in full force. The Englishers, as the Amish called them, flocked to the furniture shop at the end of the lane, looking for solid oak tables and handcrafted rocking chairs. Usually, Levi didn't mind them. They were polite enough, though they spoke too fast and looked at their phones too often. But today felt different. The air was heavy, humid, promising a storm later in the evening. Levi wiped his brow with a blue handkerchief and adjusted his suspenders. He could hear the clip-clop of his father's buggy returning from town, but his attention was caught by a different sound. A car had pulled up near the display barn. It wasn't the usual minivan filled with a loud family. It was a small silver sedan, dusted with the gravel of the backroads. A young woman stepped out. She didn't look like the usual tourists who wore bright neon shirts and pointed at the buggies like they were zoo animals. She wore a simple gray coat, though the cut was modern, and a scarf wrapped loosely around her neck. Levi watched from the shadow of the workshop. She didn't walk towards the furniture immediately. Instead, she turned toward the west, where the sun was beginning to dip behind the silo. She held a camera, a large, complicated thing. But she didn't snap pictures rapidly. She stood perfectly still, waiting. She was breathing in the air, the smell of the cut hay and the damp earth. Levi felt a strange tug in his chest, a curiosity he hadn't felt since he was a young boy, wondering what lay beyond the horizon. He stepped out of the workshop, wiping his hands on his work trousers. He intended to ask if she needed help, a standard courtesy. As he approached, his boots crunching softly on the gravel, she turned. Her eyes were the color of the autumn sky, a pale, piercing blue. She looked tired, Levi thought. Not the physical tired of baling hay, but a deep, spirit-weary kind of tired. She lowered the camera and offered a small, hesitant smile. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice soft. "I didn't mean to intrude. The light, it's just unbelievable here." Levi nodded, clasping his hands behind his back. "The light is a gift. Acai simply. You are welcome to look. The shop is open until the sun sets." She looked at him. Really looked at him, not just as a prop in the landscape, but as a man. "I'm Sarah," she said, extending a hand. Levi hesitated. Touch between men and women who were not married, especially with an outsider, was rare. But he took her hand briefly. It was soft, terrifyingly soft. "Levi," he replied. "Levi Troyer." Sarah returned the following Saturday, and the Saturday after that. She told him she was a photographer from Chicago, trying to escape the noise and the pressure of the agency she worked for. She said the city was like a machine that never slept, a grinder that chewed up silence. Levi listened. He was a good listener. He would sand the curved arm of a rocking chair, the rhythmic shishi sound filling the space between her words. They didn't talk about romance. They talked about wood. Levi showed her how to read the grain, how the oak told a story of the years that grew, the drought years, the wet years, the scars from lightning strikes. The wood remembers. Levi told her one afternoon, running his thumb over a knot in the timber. Just like people, the hard times make the wood stronger, more beautiful. Sarah watched his hands. "I take pictures of surfaces," she whispered. "But you build things that last." "I think I envy that, Levi." It was a dangerous friendship. Levi knew it. The Ordnung, the set of unwritten rules that governed Amish life, was clear about being unequally yoked with unbelievers. He was baptized. He had made his vows to the church. He was not on Rumspringa. He was a man grown, expected to find a nice Amish girl, perhaps marry Yoder from the farm over the hill, and settle down. But Mary Yoder talked only of canning and the neighbor's business. Sarah talked of art, of shadows, of the ache of loneliness in a crowded room. Levi found himself waiting for the weekends. He began to carve a small bird out of cherry wood, a bluebird. It was frivolous, not practical, something his father would frown upon, but he carved it for her. One Tuesday, a day she usually didn't come, Levi found her sitting on the fence line near the creek. She was crying. It wasn't a loud sob, just a silent stream of tears. Levi left his plow horses, tied the reins to the fence post, and walked over. He stood a few feet away, respecting her space. "The city?" he asked gently. Sarah looked up, wiping her eyes. "My father is sick," she said, "and I feel so useless. I'm just taking pictures while the world falls apart." Levi stepped closer. He didn't know the etiquette of the English world, so he did what he would do for his own sister. He sat on the grass beside her, not touching, just being present. "We cannot stop the rain, Sarah," he said, looking at the water flowing over the stones. "We can only build a shelter to withstand it. You are a good daughter. Your worry shows your love." They sat there for an hour as the sun moved across the sky. It was intimate, more intimate than a kiss. It was a meeting of souls. But from the ridge above, a black buggy had stopped. Levi's father, Bishop Silas Troyer, sat holding the reins, watching his son sitting in the grass with the English girl. The bishop's face was like stone, unreadable and cold. The confrontation happened after supper that night. The kerosene lamps cast long, flickering shadows on the kitchen walls. The smell of sauerkraut and pork lingered in the air, but Levi had no appetite. His mother, a quiet, gentle woman named Rachel, sensed the tension. She cleared the dishes quickly and retreated to the sewing room, leaving the men alone. Bishop Silas sat at the head of the long wooden table. He placed his heavy hands on the oilcloth. "Levi," he started, his voice rumbling like distant thunder, "I saw you today. By the creek." Levi stood by the window, looking out into the darkness. He did not lie. Lying was a sin. Dead. "I was there. With the English girl," Silas said. "It wasn't a question. You have been spending much time in the shop when she is here. You think I do not see. You think the community does not talk." Levi turned to face his father. "She is a friend, dead. She is hurting. Her father is ill. I offered her comfort." Comfort. Silas stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. It is not your place to comfort a woman of the world. She has her own people. She has her own ways. You are playing with fire, Levi, and fire burns down the barn. Silas walked over to the mantelpiece and picked up the small cherry-wood bluebird Levi had finished carving. He had left it on the shelf to dry. "Is this for her?" Silas asked, holding up the carving. Levi nodded. "It is a gift." Silas looked at the bird, then at his son. "We are plain, Levi. We do not make graven images. We do not make trinkets for English women to put on their mantles while they drive their cars and watch their televisions." With a heavy sigh, Silas tossed the bird into the wood stove. Levi gasped, stepping forward, but it was too late. The dry cherry wood caught fire instantly. "You must choose," Silas said, his voice dropping to a whisper that was more terrifying than his shout. "You are a baptized member of this church. If you continue this fascination with the outsider, you will face the ban. You will be shunned. You will not eat at this table. You will not work in my shop. You will be as one dead to us." The silence that followed was deafening. The threat of the shunning the midengwa was the ultimate fear. To be cut off from his mother, his sisters, his community, his God. It was a spiritual death. "She is leaving soon anyway," Levi whispered, his voice trembling. "She goes back to Chicago next week." "Then let her go," Silas said, turning his back. "And do not say goodbye." The next few days were an agony of silence. Levi worked harder than he ever had. He planed oak boards until his arms shook. He woke before dawn to milk the cows, seeking exhaustion as a way to numb the ache in his chest. He didn't go to the shop on Saturday. He stayed in the back fields, fixing fences miles away from where the silver car might pull up. He prayed. He prayed to God to take the image of her blue eyes out of his mind. He prayed for obedience. But every time the wind blew through the corn, he heard her voice. He realized with a terrifying clarity that he loved her. He loved her curiosity, her sadness, her way of seeing the beauty in his simple life that he had taken for granted. On Tuesday, the day she was supposed to leave for Chicago, the rain came. It was a torrential downpour that turned the lanes into rivers of brown mud. Levi was in the barn, mucking out the stalls, when his younger sister, Anna, came running in. She was breathless, her bonnet askew. "Levi," she whispered, looking over her shoulder to make sure Dad wasn't around. "There is a woman by the big oak tree at the end of the lane. She is standing in the rain. She says she won't leave until she sees you." Levi dropped the pitchfork. His heart hammered against his ribs. He looked at the house. His father was inside, meeting with the other ministers. Levi made his choice. He ran. He ran out of the barn, ignoring the rain that soaked his shirt instantly. He ran down the muddy lane, his boots slipping, until he reached the great oak tree. Sarah was there. She was drenched, her hair plastered to her face, shivering violently. Her car was parked on the side of the road, the engine running. "You didn't come!" she shouted over the sound of the rain. "I waited on Saturday." "You didn't come." Levi stopped a few feet from her. He wanted to hold her, to warm her, but he stood fast. "I could not, Sarah. I cannot." She stepped closer, wiping the rain from her eyes. "I'm leaving, Levi. I'm going back to Chicago." "But I had to see you. I had to ask you." She paused, her voice breaking. "Come with me." The world stopped. The rain seemed to freeze in the air. "Come with me," she repeated. "You have a gift, Levi. You're woodworking ... You could be an artist in the city. We could be together. You don't have to live by these rules. You can be free." Levi looked at her. He looked at the silver car that represented the world. He thought of the noise, the electricity, the speed. Then he looked back up the lane, toward the white farmhouse, where his mother was baking bread, where the Bible sat on the table, where his ancestors were buried in the quiet earth. "Sarah," he said, his voice choked with emotion, "I cannot be who you want me to be. My heart, ... My heart is here. If I leave, I lose everything that makes me me. I would be a hollow shell in your city." Sarah began to cry, mixing her tears with the rain. "But you love me," she said. "I know you do." "I do," Levi admitted, the words tearing out of him. "I love you more than I should, but I love my God too, and I cannot serve two masters." He reached out and took her hand one last time. It was cold. "You must go, Sarah. Go back to your life. Find your peace." She stared at him for a long moment, memorizing his face. Then, without another word, she turned and got into her car. Levi watched as she drove away, the taillights fading into the gray mist. He stood there until he was shivering, the cold seeping into his bones, feeling the greatest loss of his life. Weeks passed. The summer turned into autumn. The leaves on the maples turned fire red and pumpkin orange. Levi went through the motions of life. He attended church. He worked the wood. He ate with his family. His father seemed satisfied, believing the boy had learned his lesson. But Levi was changed. The joy had gone out of his work. He no longer saw the light. He only saw the work. Then came the letter. It wasn't mailed to the house. Levi knew his father would burn it. It was delivered by a neighbor who worked at the general store in town. He slipped it to Levi while buying feed. "A city girl left this for you." The neighbor winked, not knowing the gravity of the paper. Levi took it to the hayloft, his private sanctuary. His hands trembled as he opened the envelope. Inside was a photograph. It was a black and white picture of his own hands, working on the rocking chair. It was beautiful. It showed the strength and the gentleness of his work. And there was a note. "Levi, I went back to Chicago. I tried to go back to the agency. I tried to forget the smell of the cedar and the silence of your hills. But I couldn't. You were right. You would be hollow in my city. But I realized something else. I am hollow here. I am not asking you to leave anymore. I am asking if I can stay. I am staying at the Miller's Bed and Breakfast in town. I have been attending the Sunday services at the Mennonite church, just to understand. I am willing to learn. I am willing to slow down. If there is any hope, meet me at the bridge on Sunday." Levi stared at the letter. This was not a request for him to jump the fence. It was a request for her to open the gate. It was unheard of rare, difficult, but not impossible. Englishers had become Amish before. It was a hard road. She would have to give up her car, her camera, her clothes, her family. Levi closed his eyes. He realized that God worked in mysterious ways. Perhaps the test was not to push her away, but to see if her faith could become as real as his. Sunday came. The air was crisp, smelling of fallen leaves. Levi dressed in his Sunday best. He hitched the horse to the open buggy. "Where are you going?" his father asked from the porch. Levi looked at his father. He was no longer the boy who was afraid of the fire. He was a man who understood that love was also a fire, one that God kindled. "I am going to the bridge. Dead," Levi said calmly. Sarah has returned. She wants to learn our ways. Silas's face darkened. She is English. Ruth was a Moabite, Levi said, quoting the scripture. And she said, "Your people shall be my people, and your God my God." If Sarah is willing to walk this path, who are we to close the door? Silas stared at his son. He saw the resolve in Levi's eyes. He saw the iron beneath the velvet. The bishop didn't smile, but he nodded slowly, a slight dip of his chin. The path is hard. Levi, she will likely fail. Then I will help her up, Levi said. He snapped the reins. Giddy up. The years have a way of softening the sharp edges of the land. 5 years later, the farmhouse looks much the same. The laundry snaps on the line in the breeze-plain shirts, dark trousers, and simple dresses. In the workshop, a little boy, perhaps 4 years old, plays with a block of wood in the shavings. Levi is at the bench, finishing a dining table. He looks older, more settled. The restlessness is gone from his eyes. The door opens. A woman enters. She wears a prayer covering over her hair and a simple cape dress of blue. She carries a basket of apples. It is Sarah. Her hands are no longer the soft hands of a city photographer. They are capable, strong hands that know how to knead dough and weed a garden. She sets the basket down and walks over to Levi. She doesn't use a camera to capture the light anymore. She lives in it. She rests her hand on his shoulder. "The light is good today," she says, speaking the Pennsylvania Dutch dialect softly. Levi stops his work. He places his hand over hers. He looks at the table he has built strong, sturdy, made to last generations. And he looks at his wife, the woman who crossed the bridge between worlds to find her home. "Ja?" Levi smiles. The deep, contented smile of a man who has everything he needs. The light is very good. They stand there in the quiet. The only sound, the wind in the corn and the laughter of their son playing in the sawdust. It was a hard road. A narrow road, but it was the right one.